Good afternoon. Welcome to ILO's presentation on the Partnership for Improving Prospect for Forcibly Displaced Person and Host Community. I will be very pleased to introduce to you ILO's approach and contribution to this very important partnership, but focusing more on the social cohesion and peace building aspect of it. Very shortly, my name is Nieves Tomé. I'm ILO Employment for Peace Specialist. I work in close collaboration with the Prospect team who are in several countries and at the global level managed by the global coordinator called Nick Griswood, who apologized not being able to come here because of other urgent matters, but we'll be happy to answer any questions. So before anything, let me try to put my presentation, which I don't see, unfortunately, now. Yeah, I think we'll have a little problem. It says that the project pitch will begin shortly, but I don't see my presentation. I don't know if someone can help us here. Switch with the arrow. Yeah, this is what I'm doing. Okay, well, I think we're going to have to do that without any presentation because it doesn't appear here. Okay. Okay, anyway, I'll start. So, yes, before anything, let me introduce you to the ILO because I'm sure many of you might not know the International Labour Organization or might not really see the link between the International Labour Organization and peace. So the ILO was actually the first UN specialized organization created in 1919. So we're a very, very old organization. And we were actually created by a peace treaty, which is the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I. And actually, after World War I, as we know, there was more than 40 million dead, wounded, and millions of people left with no livelihood or prospects of livelihood. So there was really an urgent need and call for international institutions that could engage countries in a common effort on labor and social policies. So I think, sorry, it's back here. Perfect. Good. So let me put the timeline here. Yes. So it was agreed that we needed an organization that could aid recovery, but also address the social and economic cause that had led to war in the first place. And it was believed at the time already that universal and lasting peace can only be accomplished and achieved if it's based on social justice, and that poverty, unemployment, and decent work deficit, and what we mean, and I'm going to talk a lot about decent work deficit, is work that do not include rights, fundamental rights at work, that do not include the quality. So what we mean by decent work is not any kind of job. It's a job that also respects the rights, promotes social dialogue, access to social protection, and fundamental rights being respected, such as, of course, anti-discrimination, a minimum salary, etc. So that it was very important because themselves, the decent work deficit can become triggers of vulnerability and fragility. On top of it, it was agreed already in 1919 that such institution should not only be represented by member states. And this is a very important dimension of the ILO because ILO is the only tripartite organization. We're represented by the government, the member states, about 187, but not only. There is also the representative of the workers through the workers' organization that are also members, the trade unions, and the private sector through the employers' organization that are also members of our organization and governing body. So I'm not going to go into details. We have a timeline here with different very important steps that reinforce the key role of ILO and therefore of employment in peace building throughout the century. Let me just highlight some important ones, such as 1961 Peace Nobel Prize that the ILO got, recognizing its crucial role in wartime and its role on working towards social justice and peace. And in this overall framework, the ILO has even strengthening its policy framework to respond to crises, including forcibly displacement, in 2016, through the adoption of the guiding principle on the access of refugee and other forcibly displaced persons to the labor market. And in 2017, by a very important recommendation for us, which is recommendation 205 on employment and decent work for peace and resilience, that provides actual normative framework, the only normative framework, focusing on the world of work-related measures to prevent and respond to the devastating effect of crises caused by conflict or natural disaster or pandemics, like the one we're living now, unfortunately, on economies and society, while also paying special attention to vulnerable groups like children, young people, women, and displaced persons. And there is even a specific chapter in Recommendation 205 on how to implement it among refugee, forcibly displaced, migrant, also there's a separate chapter, and host community. So now let me concentrate a bit more on Prospect and on this project. The Prospect is a concrete expression of the consensus that has emerged around the need for displaced person and host community to enjoy enhanced economic opportunity and for children on the move to have effective and inclusive access to protection and education. And that was confirmed by the New York Declaration on Refugee and Migrants of 2016 that member states unanimously adopted, which strongly affirmed the principle, standard, and practice of the international refugee regime and call upon UNHCR, among others, to launch the application of this framework through also a global compact on refugee that was adopted in 2018. And the global compact on refugee is the basis of this partnership too. Furthermore, as displacement has become increasingly, unfortunately, protracted all over the world, response are focusing on a durable solution, long-term solution, backed by more dignified, inclusive, and comprehensive program for refugee and the community that hosts them. Decent employment, again, and as I described it, the quality of employment, the respect of fundamental rights of employment, the right of collective bargaining, of dialogue of employment, and also the right of social protection, access to health, which is very important in what we're living right now. But all this decent employment for refugees and host community are complementary in the humanitarian protection agenda, but not only. There is urgent action on short-term response, but also with long-term perspective. And that's what's so important if we want to translate our role and respond to the key needs of refugees and host community in the humanitarian development peace nexus. And based on that, the agreement and this partnership aim to reinforce the role of humanitarian organization, but also development organization like ours. Furthermore, the entry of refugee international labor market can sometimes exacerbate an already challenging situation and put peace building and social cohesion in a host country at risk. And that's where we come into that dimension of peace and social cohesion. And particularly now, COVID-19 is exacerbating those challenges and specific vulnerability that forcibly displaced person already faced, including psychological trauma, lack of opportunity and protection risk. Host communities struggle to pursue their own development effort in an environment that has been transformed by a large influx of newcomers. And the crisis can potentially ignite or exacerbate existing grievances, perception of discrimination or real discrimination, mistrust, sense of injustice of one community towards another over access to health, but also access to decent jobs, access to livelihoods. And all these are potential conflict drivers that could undermine development, peace, and social cohesion. Epidemics and economic crises can have a disproportionate impact on certain segments of the population, especially the most vulnerable and disadvantaged groups, which can lead to increasing inequality, thereby posing a severe threat to peace. So the partnership based on this, unfortunately, framework aims to join partners, development and humanitarian partners' effort to develop the new paradigm in responding to forced displacement crisis through the involvement of different actors. The partners, when we talk about that partnership, include the Netherlands, include the ILO, include UNICEF, that works mainly on child, the UNHCR, which is the High Commissioner for Refugee, the World Bank, and IFC, the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group. The partnership aims to help to transform the way government and other stakeholders, such as the private sector and workers also, respond to forced displacement by, first of all, fostering and enabling environment for economic inclusion. Second, improving access to education and protection for vulnerable children on the move. And third, strengthening the resilience of host community. This program is implemented in 8 countries: Middle East, North Africa, and East Africa. In East Africa, it covers Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya. And in the Middle East and North Africa, Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, and Jordan. These are all countries with a large influx of refugees. So what's the added value of this partnership? Why working together? Well, it provides a platform for demonstrating the benefits of innovative approach that can enhance impact on the ground. It maximizes synergy and leverage comparative advantage of each partner instead of working silos, that what we unfortunately very often do, and try to merge all our different mandates for more results. To leverage and amplify existing programs funded through each organizational resources, and to provide a platform also of mutual learning and exchange of experience on what works and what doesn't work. Well, it's a little bit difficult to read, but very shortly, and I'm not going to go into details here, but you'll find some more information in our platform with all the details about those different projects. But I would say that there is 3 main pillars to the program, which is the first one, education and learning. Members of forcibly displaced and host community, particularly young people and women, benefit from effective and inclusive transition into education, training, and decent work. And from the ILO perspective, it means that we won't work directly on the education of children, but vocational training of young adults in line with the needs of the labor market. So to make sure that they would access a decent job once they have an adequate training in line with the needs of the labor market. The second pillar is protection and legal status. Forcibly displaced person and host community are better protected in an inclusive world of work that include everyone, that make sure that they are protected and have access to at least a social protection floor. And the third pillar, it's really decent work and social protection per se, for forcibly displaced person and host community have access to more and decent work. So there are some examples of what each organization do. In the case of UNICEF, it's linked to child protection, to WASH activity, water and sanitation, and many other activities that I won't have time here to go into more details, but you can ask for more information later on. From UNHCR, it's mainly the protection of refugee, coordination of all the international activities, etc. From the World Bank, public-private solution for both community. IFC would be promoting private sector investments. And from the ILO, where I develop a little bit more, will be really the promotion of decent work for access to fundamental rights, such as ensuring that there is no child labor. As you know, when we are talking about large influx of refugees, very often there is also the exacerbation of the human and fundamental rights at work respect or not respected anymore, such as trafficking, human trafficking, child labor, etc. The importance to ensure that the social partners, such as trade unions and work organizations, participate also in the decision-making process, to promote skills, vocational skills, program and capacity, to recognize also some prior learning capacity of those refugees that didn't come with their diploma, so also to recognize their skills, to promote apprenticeship, etc., to promote enterprise development, to promote local economic integrated development, to promote infrastructure, also development through employment-intensive infrastructure, and enabling environment. So now I'm going to give some very specific example, not of the overall. Prospect does many things. So I don't think we have time, and it's not the aim of this panel to go into the details of everything that does Prospect, but to look more closely at what the ILO and how the ILO see the role of this program to reinforce at the same time social cohesion and peace. So through Prospect, the ILO aims to promote inclusive employment, as I mentioned, and decent work approaches that can create, of course, economic opportunities for both communities, but also mitigate impact on local, promoting social cohesion between displaced and host community, and reduce grievances and sense of injustice, thus promoting social cohesion, peaceful coexisting in affected communities. Therefore, social cohesion is mainstream throughout the program through specific conflict-sensitive approaches and right-based approach. For refugees, the opportunity to access decent work is fundamental to their protection as well and well-being, but also to restore human dignity and a sense of purpose in life. Being able to access employment, maintain and expand their skills, and find a decent job can prevent long gaps in education and economic activity. Furthermore, working allows for greater, more meaningful interaction between refugees and host community, and help foster a climate of trust and exchange, and therefore peaceful coexistence between the communities. Nevertheless, we have to really a very important point, and it's beyond Prospect, it's in all development program that aims to build peace, it's not automatic. Employment and decent work intervention will not automatically help to promote social cohesion and peace in a forcibly displaced environment. While there is very established link and theory on the relation between employment, economic development, and social cohesion, empirical evidence remains still scarce, and effective intervention need to build on an analysis of prevalent drivers of conflict and conflict of violence, and conflict in a given context. Therefore, we really push that all our activity addressing employment and decent work contribute to social cohesion if they actually address a factor that is salient driver of conflict in a given context. I'll give some example later. And that they are all conflict sensitivity in design and implementation, and that they are fully adapted to reality. We all know that, like what we call the no harm approach. We know that that's not something that most organizations do, but we used to have those kind of example of, for example, a program that would only focus on refugees in a situation where there is very little access to livelihood for the host community that are already suffering at the local level. So it can create even more frustration, even more grievances towards another community, having the international community just helping the refugees. So we see how important it is to make sure that everything we do is conflict sensitive and inclusive in order to avoid making more harm than having positive results. In the absence, actually, of a conflict sensitive approach, particularly in this time that we're living of COVID-19, the international response risk really to exacerbate conflict risk. Particularly in countries already affected by violent conflict, and may miss out actually some critical inclusive opportunities. So the way we do through Prospect in the ILO, there are several things. I'm going to give some example of some of our employment approach that also promote social cohesion intentionally, not just taking for granted that giving livelihood will lead to peace, but looking how they really try to include some very specific social cohesion with specific indicator. I'm not going to go into details, but it's also important, linked to what I just said, in order to start building evidence on that linkage of creating employment for both community and how this will create more social cohesion and therefore more peace. So we also need to assess it through a perception change of one community towards another indicators. So some of the projects that we are implementing are, for example, skills development programs. So it's what we call TVET, a technical and vocational training program. The ILO has developed a specific conflict management and social cohesion module that is systematically included in vocational training curricula for forcibly displaced and host community to increase actually the potential of the vocational training program to contribute to access to the labor market. So it can be a training on plumbery, for example, that it's really linked to the needs of the community, but at the same time that it's contributing to social cohesion. Concretely, it means that an intervention would not enhance employability, which is what we're aiming. Employability is key, but it won't access it in a sector of high demand if it doesn't at the same time reinforce intergroup relation that may have been strained, for example, by offering training to different groups together. We can put, and we have done that in different countries as a pilot to ensure that we give training to both the Syrian refugee and the Jordanian host community in the same classroom. So together they reinforce also trust, connection, contact, which have an impact on social cohesion, but also reinforce their own skills as peace builders beyond just the employability aspect of their training. So we're piloting this approach in different countries, in Ethiopia, in Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, and we have already started in Lebanon and Jordan. There is enterprise support. In Lebanon and Jordan, for example, the ILO has promoted joint small enterprise in one value chain, for example, and cooperative between Syrian refugees and host community, particularly women, to foster contact and relation. And like this also in the same way that putting different community in the same classroom, having them developing a joint enterprise, a cooperative, can reduce negative perception among communities and gender. So it creates livelihood, but simultaneously it promotes contact and social cohesion. So that's the kind of approach that we are really trying to promote. Another example is through employment intensive investment program. It's a very large program implemented by the ILO, where employment intensive construction of community infrastructure also address short-term needs, immediate needs on assets for refugees, but also IDPs, internally displaced population, as well as host community, and create the environments for development in rural or marginalized area. So there's short-term emergency public work schemes, for instance, that can help mitigate the socio-economic impact of COVID-19, while at the same time creating immediate job opportunity for the most vulnerable, provide short-term income, and help maintain productivity while contributing to long-term development and social cohesion. Working together allow for more interaction, for more trust. And based on careful targeting, underpinned by conflict-sensitive consideration to be sure that we implement no harm approach, such schemes could specifically hire a vulnerable and excluded group and favor then intergroup relation in selecting the participant. And short-term investment in infrastructure can lead to more long-term infrastructure investment that could generate long-term employment, fully embedded into a larger local, regional, and national employment strategy. So a focus on building infrastructure, assets, and services that promote social and economic development, increasing agricultural productivity, providing care work, supporting education and health, and addressing environment and climate-related challenges in investing in the future. So it's a way really of from one stone to target different target. Livelihoods, but at the same time, ensuring peace on the longer term. For example, on the recovery after the Beirut blast, we have also an experience working on reconstruction, rebuilding through employment-intensive program of the city with the participation of Syrian refugee with Lebanese community. So at the same time that we are creating livelihood, we're reconstructing and we're building social cohesion. So through Prospect, the ILO promotes conflict-sensitive approach, and its employment program foster also tolerance, respect, and more importantly, social justice in order to address misunderstanding and misperception that may give rise to social unrest. Well, thank you very much. I think I covered very quickly. Sorry if I spoke very fast. I'm very sorry to think that we don't have a lot of time for questions, but I'll try to take at least one or two. And for the rest, I'll be very happy to answer in the platform your question. So, have you learned anything from working on refugees in these 8 countries that you think European and other countries struggling with refugees' economic integration could benefit from? We're just, all this is very new. So I don't think we can come to concrete examples of success yet, but we have emerging good practices. One thing for sure is what we've been doing, as the example I gave on employment, intensive activities, having Syrian refugee working with Lebanese workers or with Jordan workers in Jordan has really increased the positive perception of one another. And that we have really concrete results. We have conducted different evaluation on this, and there is a strong impact on social cohesion. And I think we always come back, and that's where maybe every country, unfortunately, can learn from it. I say unfortunately because that's what we're living also in Europe, is the lack of, well, the lack not yet, but at least the risk of having a lack of social cohesion. So the importance of working together, of exchange, of trust, and this is very important, having an inclusive approach to employment and to ensure that we don't think of jobs, any kind of job. The quality of job is key. And this we have seen, especially for the young people. They just don't want a livelihood, not any livelihood. They want a voice. So it's also quite important to make sure that through work, we give a voice to young people, we give a voice to the women to also share their aspiration and their need in order to ensure social justice. Question 2, sorry, it's going to be the last one. I have trouble reading here. Evidence suggests that displaced and informal workers have been worst affected by the economic effect of COVID-19. How has your program adapted to respond to this new reality? Yes, indeed. This is very unfortunately, and of course it comes back to the fact that informal workers have no access in general to social protection schemes. And that's where the ILO is really trying to push for transition to formality and to formalize displaced and refugee workers, to give them the right to work. So we push in many countries for also labor and work permits for the refugees. So through their work, they have access at least to a minimum social protection scheme, which is key on a crisis like COVID, but not only. It's also key to make sure that you have a voice again, because you can be part of a trade union, so you can also ensure that you're part of a social dialogue scheme. So yes, that's where, more importantly, we highlight the fact that it's important to promote decent work for all, particularly for the more excluded populations, such as women, displaced, people with disability too, refugees, migrants that very often work in full informality, therefore have no access to rights. So for peace, we need rights and social justice. And I think that's what we've been learning, and we know that it confirms every day more and more. I'm very sorry. I think we're already at the end, but thank you so much. I see many other questions that I'll be very happy to answer on the platform. And please, I think there is also a possibility of asking more questions directly on the platform. Many thanks to all of you.